Welcome to App Stories, a weekly exploration of the world of apps. Today's show is brought to you by Luna Display and Direct Mail. I'm John Voorhees, and with me is my co-host, Federico Viticci. Hey, Federico.
Hello, John Voorhees. How are you?
I am doing very well, thank you. It's been quite a couple of weeks on MacStories. I feel like I've said that a couple of times now, but it's kind of true. It's been quite a spring for us between all the things that have been going on. And
when you think about it, it's been a couple of years in our lives.
Really?
In general.
Yeah, I suppose you're right about that. I really should just get used to the new normal, shouldn't I?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so today we have an interesting episode. We're going to talk about a new app that I know both of us love a lot, which is Timery. But we're also going to tease a little something. Our last big announcement before WWDC, we're going to tease that and talk about it and preview it a little bit at the very end of the show. So
yeah, so
I guess stick around for that.
Exactly. So either stick around, or if you are the extremely curious type, you can just skip to the next chapter or something. But stay until the end because it's going to be worth it. So yeah, we should start by talking about time tracking. John, what is time tracking for those who do not do that? Which is, I think the majority of people don't.
No, it's true. I mean, I have a long history with time tracking, as I wrote in the review that I did on MacStories about Timery. And it's really just keeping track of your time, keeping track of the projects and the tasks that you work on in order to do a number of different things. I mean, back in the day when I was a lawyer, I used to do that so that you could send out bills because all of our time was billed hourly. And, a lot of freelancers, designers, and developers and other people do that too. And that is something that you can do time tracking for. But I know you and I don't do that. We're not billing anybody for our time. We're doing it merely to get a sense of what it is that we're working on day to day and looking at it kind of over the course of time, whether it's the last week, the last month, the last year, maybe this month compared to last month, looking at the data in different ways to get a sense for, are we being productive? Are we working on the things that are, bringing in the most revenue? All those kinds of questions can be answered by tracking your time. And that's why we do it. And you and I both use a service that's called Toggl. And Toggl has a web app. They also have their own iOS and Mac apps. But Timery is a brand new app that just came out last week that is kind of a front end for that, because Toggl has a web API and you can hook into it. And with Timery, it's hooked into that API. And, I've used the Toggl apps before. They have gotten better over time, but they're not nearly as good as Timery. And I really enjoy Timery. And that's what we're going to talk about today. What do you use time tracking for? I assume it's roughly what I use it for too.
Yeah, I think I got into time tracking years ago when the Cortex podcast with Mike Hurley and CGP Grey started on Relay FM. And I remember Gray was 3 years ago, I guess, at this point, was talking about the idea of time tracking as a way to, even if you're self-employed, and especially if you're self-employed, I guess, to keep yourself accountable in the context of having the raw data and the numbers to understand where your time is going. And Gray was making the argument in favor of doing essentially a ROI, like a return on investment calculation.
Right.
And say, I spent X amount of hours on this project, and this project accounted for X dollars in terms of income. Was it worth it? So I found that idea very, very interesting and fascinating to the extent where I guess I try not to produce MacStories and do all the other projects that we do with that mindset. Like, I think there are certain things and certain activities that you should invest your time on, even though they don't have a direct impact on the bottom line, or maybe even though it's hard to quantify. Things like establishing your online presence, for specific topics. It's hard to put a number on that. Like,
right.
In my personal case, folks maybe associate me as the person who works on the iPad. And you can make the argument that I spent a bunch of years and God knows how many hours trying to find my place in that community, trying to learn about the iPad, trying to learn about iPad apps. Can I put a number on that? In terms of hours, sure, but what about dollars? It's hard to quantify, but it's definitely something that helped me during my job. And so I don't track my time just because I want to perform that calculation every single time, but I think it's important to have the numbers for two reasons. There are cases where I want to perform the calculation. So things like my reviews or the articles that I publish for MacStories or the club. Those are, there's almost a one-to-one relationship between the hours spent working on those and the income generated from those activities. But also the second reason I like time tracking is to have a personal overview of what is my day like. Because it's easy to get, especially when you're self-employed, it's easy to get distracted and have an idea of what your job is like in your mind. But actually, when you look at the numbers, when you look at the categories, when you look at the totals, it's something completely different. And you realize, oh, well, I spent 2 hours catching up on my Twitter timeline or reading through my RSS feeds. Maybe I should do something else. So it's a way to keep myself accountable. And it's also a way to calculate whether what I'm doing, what I'm spending time on is actually worth it, financially speaking, but not always. I guess that would be my asterisk to CGP Gray's argument.
Yeah, I think I'm similar in that way. I don't do like a hard calculation very often. I more than anything else, I like to look, I guess, at
maybe holistically is the right word here. Like
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I like to look, if you go to the Toggl website and you go to their reports, one of the things they have is a circular kind of like a pie chart that shows you what percentage of whatever it is, the month, the week, the year, whatever it is that you're doing, that you're spending on each of your major projects. And I find that super helpful because I can look and I can see over time how the work I'm doing is evolving. There are different parts of the year where different things, maybe I'm writing more on MacStories for these months here in the summer, but in the fall, I'm doing more at the club and that kind of thing. And I can get a sense for what percentage of my day each of those activities takes up compared to the others. And, it doesn't tell me what to do, but if I look at that and I see, it really looks like I'm not spending a lot of time on this particular project, but I'm also feeling really stressed about it. I kind of wonder, why is that? I mean, is it because it's just something I don't like to do? Is it because I've neglected it and it's been nagging at the back of my mind? That sort of thing is what I find, really helpful about time tracking. This episode of App Stories is brought to you by Luna Display. If you have a Mac and an iPad, you're going to want to listen to this because our friends at Luna Display are saving us so much money and improving our workflows. With the Luna Display, you don't need to spend a fortune on extra screens for your Mac. Luna Display lets you use your iPad as a wireless display for that Mac. Just plug in a little bit of hardware and connect over Wi-Fi or USB, and boom, more screen real estate. This means you can even have multiple screens without having to spend money on a new screen, only to have to leave it at home when you travel, because Luna Display can travel with you. What I love about the Luna Display is that it frees me from my desk. I work all over the house now and outside. Wherever I have a Wi-Fi connection, I can connect to my Mac. If I've forgotten a file that I need to send someone, maybe it's in my downloads folder, which doesn't sync with iOS, I can just grab that file right out of the downloads folder, attach it to an email, and send it off. There are a million little use cases like that. The kind of thing where you're comfortable and you don't want to get up and go to your desk and deal with something. You can deal with it right in the moment and take care of it, and you're done. It's fantastic. And look, it's not just me that loves the Luna Display. Our colleagues at a lot of other websites like it too. iMore said the Luna Display will change your travel workflow, and TechCrunch described the visual fidelity of Luna Display as frankly stunning. Also, Apple Insider said that this was the first time that a wireless solution had impressed them. Look, you're going to be really happy with your Luna Display, so go now to lunadisplay.com. Once you're there, enter the promo code STORIES at checkout for 10% off. That's lunadisplay.com and the promo code STORIES at checkout. You're going to love this thing. It's handy, it's smart, and it's going to save you money on extra screens. I'm going to give you that URL just one more time, lunadisplay.com and use the promo code STORIES to get 10% off. You're going to love it. Our thanks to Luna Display for their support of App Stories.
So let's talk about Timery and what's so special about Timery, because so many, I feel this has been one of those betas where a lot of people had the previous version of the beta version of the app, and our audience kept asking, when is it coming out? When is it coming out? Why is it such a big deal? We've been talking about it. I've mentioned the app a few times in my articles, and Mike and Steven have been talking about it. And of course, there's a bunch of other folks on Reddit that were on the beta as well. I guess what makes Timery special? There's a few things that I would like to talk about. First of all, the fact that the Toggl app, and of course, the premise would be that Toggl is the most popular and useful time tracking online service with a open API, so it integrates with a bunch of other services and all of that. But their iOS app is kind of terrible. Only recently launched on the iPad, but it's extremely uninspired. It really feels like this. It's not an iOS app that takes advantage of all the modern iOS technologies and features that it could take advantage of, whereas Timery is exactly that. It's a modern iOS app with all the features and design touches and integrations that you might expect from an iOS app that's coming out in 2019 for iOS 12, and it works with Toggl. So it's sort of like the Tweetbot to Twitter's official app. Timery is kind of like it's that for Toggl, essentially.
Yeah, that's a good way to think about it. What's funny is that I don't remember when you started using Timery before I did. You're on the beta first, but boy, I think I've used this app for 10 months before it was actually released. And that's why there was an awful lot of buzz around it, because this was an app that I was using every single day of the week for months and months and months before I actually wrote about it.
Yeah, I started testing it in August 2018, so 10 months almost.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a long time ago.
All right, so why don't we kind of talk about a few of the features, because to me, what makes Timery special is how easy it is to start and stop timers. And that's important because time tracking, as valuable as it is, it's a little bit like eating healthy or exercising. It can be a really hard habit to create, especially if you're busy. It's really easy to kind of fall off the time tracking wagon. But as soon as you do that, your data is kind of corrupted in the sense that here you are, you're working really hard, you've got a lot going on, you're not tracking your time, and you've lost the value of being able to compare that period to some other period. So consistency is very important in time tracking. And Timery allows that because it's got a whole bunch of different ways to enter your tasks. And I guess it probably helps to start with explaining a little bit about how the app is broken down, because we've already kind of mentioned there's projects. That's kind of the top level. And I'll let you get into tasks in a minute, since that's something a little special with Toggl. But there's projects, and then there's a description, which is whatever it is you're doing, and you can tag things. So those are the three main elements at the base level. And I should mention too that Toggl has a very generous free subscription, so you can get involved in this and track your time with Toggl without and try it without actually having to spend any money. But there are benefits and other features that you can get from actually subscribing to Toggl. So Timery lets you save timers. Mm-hmm. And a save timer is basically a project with a description, something that you do regularly, maybe a tag. And I have a whole bunch of those. I use them for things like when I'm researching a story, or when I'm writing a news link or a post, or I'm writing a review, or I'm following up with a sponsor for the website, that kind of thing. Because once you have you have saved timers in the app, which is the first tab, all you need to do to start it is to tap on it. And if you have another timer that's already running, it stops that one and starts the new one. It's a really nice way to do that. And those saved timers are available in the widget as well, and via Siri shortcuts.
It's one of my favorite features of the app is the ability to basically create a preset for any combination of descriptions and projects and tags and subtasks, and invoke that via Siri. And I do this all the time. I would say that invoking one of the Siri shortcuts for Timery on my HomePod is possibly the most common use case for me. I have saved timers, for example, for when I'm writing for MacStories, or now that the summer is approaching, I have presets for my iOS review, whether it's like screenshot time or research or writing, editing. I create a whole bunch of these presets as saved timers, and I call them via Siri. And they also work, of course, on iOS, but they also work, the Siri shortcuts of Timery, they also work as actions as part of longer custom shortcuts. So you can also have that kind of integration if you have like a longer routine and you want to make sure that you can start your time tracking based on, I don't know, things like completing a reminder or a calendar event that's going on soon and that kind of stuff. You mentioned tasks. Those are an optional feature of Toggl that's only available to paying subscribers of the service. And once you are, they also show up in Timery. Otherwise, the app doesn't show you the task feature at all. And tasks are basically a way to break down a project into multiple categories or different steps. So, for example, my MacStories project has things like admin or article writing or linked posts, which are different from regular articles. I have support for the Club MacStories project, for example. It's a way to have a bigger area of responsibility and then break it down into multiple projects or different areas.
Right.
So that really works well for me, and the way that it's exposed in Timery is really well done. Once you are a premium Toggl subscriber, even if you are on the Toggl starter plan, you're going to be able to use tasks. You will see the tasks as indented into a project. So it's really communicated visually really well. And all my saved timers are essentially based on tasks. So project, task, description, and tags. I use it all because later when I go to the Toggl web app, I can see the reports, and I want to talk about this in a minute. I can see the reports, and I can filter those reports by task and by tag. So it's a really good way for me to see the total amount of time I've spent not only on a project, but also on a project that matches a task or that matches a tag or a description. So that's really useful for me to see, for example, how much time did I spend writing a review versus how much time did I spend editing the review. So that kind of stuff is really well done thanks to tasks, and those are fully supported in Timery. What's not supported in Timery that you also called out in your review, John, is the stats and the reports. Those are only available in the Toggl web app and native official client.
Right. And hopefully that'll be coming soon. I know it's on the list of things that the developer would like to do. I know Joe Herbar, he's been thinking about that, and I'd love to see that come at some point in the future. I could definitely see it being, a fourth tab in this tab bar at the bottom of the app. The other thing that we should mention is how easy it is to kind of make these save timers, because what you can do, it's not like you have to come up with these out of the blue. When you tap the plus button to do create a save timer, you've got a list. You can do it, from scratch, but you've got a list in that add screen that has all of your recent timers that you've run in the app. So it's super easy to just go through and say, oh, here's something that I do all the time. Tap on it, and all of a sudden you've got a new save timer, which is really nice.
Yeah. Are there any other features that you would like to describe about Timery that really stand out? One for me, I guess, and this is probably a minor detail, and I mean, besides the widget, which is just excellent, I love how when you start a timer, so there's a bar at the bottom of the app, and when you tap the play button to start a timer, even if you haven't entered yet a description or a project or any other info about the timer, the time is already counting up. So
yes,
the time
that is really nice.
Already started, and then you can fill in, the title, the description, and the project, and all those other fields. But in the meantime, the timer is already going, and that's exactly the way that it should work. Start the timer, then let me enter the info. And also, I love how at any point you can just go in, and maybe whether you forgot to enter to start a timer, or if you left a timer running for too long, you can just edit whatever has already been saved in Toggl, and you can just make sure that the times are all correct.
Yeah, that's a really nice feature. I enjoy that a lot too. The other thing that's kind of cool, at least on the iPhone, is you've got haptic feedback. And what I like about that is when I start that timer, I get that little tap to let me know, even if I'm in the middle of doing something else and all I'm doing is reaching down and tapping that bar, I know that it started. And then when I end it, I know it, I can be shoving my phone into my pocket and feel the tap and know that I actually hit the button and that it stopped.
Yeah.
It's a really nice way to do it. And the other thing about what, as you said, by having the timer start the minute that you hit the play button, that way, if you get distracted by something and you don't fill everything out completely, you can always go back. It's just like doing the editing that you mentioned. You can go in at any time and just fill out whatever details you want and adjust as necessary. The other Siri shortcut that I use a lot is to just stop timers, because I have a terrible habit of getting up from my desk and not stopping my timer. But the good thing is I'm either somewhere in my house where I can shout at my HomePod, or I'm walking out the door and I can do it on my watch, or I'm in the car even and I can do it over CarPlay and just stop it. So I don't, I no longer really wake up in the morning with one of those emails from Toggl that says you've had MacStories Timery review has been running for 16 hours or something like that. That just doesn't really happen anymore because there's so many different ways to stop the timers when you need to do it.
Yeah, and to sort of round up Timery as an app, we mentioned all the modern iOS integrations that Timery has. To give you an idea, dark mode, multiple themes, customizable app icons, as you mentioned, multiple Siri shortcuts. One that I love that is also available by default is to check today's times. So
Right.
just tell me how much have how long have I been working today? That is just excellent. There's let's see, I'm just taking a look in the settings whether we forgot something. Yeah, I think we pretty much covered it all.
I think so.
Yeah, I love, this is one hidden preference maybe. You can choose to show or hide the tag names. And I just love it because, of course, I want to see my tags in the main lists of the app.
Right.
But if you're distracted by tags, or if you just don't want to see the extra line of text, you can just hide it. And it's such a lovely design detail. And it sort of speaks to developer Joseph Ibarri's sort of care and craft for building Timery. He's been working really hard on this type of app. And this is the kind of story that I love to tell on MacStories and on the podcasts. Single developer who identified successfully a very specific niche of the type of iOS user that wants to be productive on iOS. And to be productive, it also means to have time tracking available as a tool on the side. And he made an app for that. And that is just, it reminds me of the sort of the heyday of, these lovely crafted indie apps that we used to cover maybe more a few years ago, but we still try hard to discover them. And this is just an excellent example. A single person who made this awesome app that we all use at MacStories I love it. It's perfect.
Yeah, we're having a good year for indie apps. I mean, we've seen some really interesting stuff. There was Perfect Tempo.
I think so.
From Open Planet, and we've had there's been some great updates to Scriptable and JSON, and there's just a lot of really interesting stuff out there that has come up in the last 6 months or so. It's going to make our job hard at the end of the year when we try to pick our favorites, I think.
Yeah, I know. We'll see.
This episode of App Stories is brought to you by DirectMail, an easy-to-use email marketing app designed exclusively for the Mac to help you create and send great-looking email newsletters. Email marketing is still an incredibly cost-effective way to reach your customers and grow your business. And for the past 15 years, Mac users around the world have trusted the DirectMail app to handle all of their email marketing needs. It's designed just for the Mac, which means it's fast and it's easy to use. Also, it works great with other apps and services you already use. With DirectMail, you can grow your mailing list by creating email sign-up forms that you can add to your website or Facebook page. You can also save time by integrating with over 1,000 other apps and services on your Mac and the web. Have email campaigns sent automatically without lifting a finger. They have real human live chat customer support too, and it's available to answer all of your questions. And DirectMail is the #1 top-rated email marketing app for the Mac, with 5-star reviews on the App Store, GetApp, and elsewhere. And it's trusted by small businesses, nonprofits, schools, and Fortune 500 companies alike. DirectMail is free to download and get started. Listeners of App Stories can save 10% off all of the full feature pricing plans. head over to directmailmac.com/appstories to check it out. That's directmailmac.com/appstories to get 10% off when you opt for a full feature plan. I'll put a link in the show notes too. Our thanks to Direct Mail for their support of App Stories. So, Federico, we have a little announcement, a little something to tell our listeners about today.
All right. So, for all those who skipped ahead, this is why you skipped ahead. But if you go back now, later, you should go back and listen to the previous section if you haven't.
Absolutely.
I also thought it was pretty good, but okay. So, this is the announcement. Okay.
So, we have a new podcast that is coming tomorrow. It's called Dialog, and it's a MacStories production. It's a show all about technology and its impact on culture, society, and creativity. It comes out of App Stories in a lot of ways, which is why we wanted to mention it here, because I think Federico put it really well when he's been describing it to people as an App Stories spinoff, because everybody knows that we have had interviews on this show, but this show is a little constrained for interviewing because it's typically around a half an hour long, and that means that we can't go in as much depth as we'd like, and because it's a show about apps, we can't always go as broadly as we'd like, nor can Federico and I participate as much as we'd sometimes like. Mm-hmm. So what Dialogue is going to be is a series of conversations that starts not from the kind of the tech angle, not from talking about apps, for instance, but from the creative angle. And we are starting with, it's a seasonal podcast that's going to be released every single week during the season. And at the end of the season, we'll take a little break and we'll come back with a second season after we, come up with a new topic. And for season 1, which drops tomorrow, we are going to be talking to a series of writers about writing, because we thought, that's something that we know a little bit about. It should be a good place to start. And we've got a very interesting mix of guests coming up on the show. Mm-hmm. The show, though, is bookended by episodes that are just me and Federico, including tomorrow's episode, which is just the two of us, where we're going to kind of set the stage, talk a little bit about, we've already interviewed some of these people, and so we have a sense for where the season's going, and so we wanted to set the stage for what kinds of things we're going to be talking about, and also to provide kind of our own personal perspective from the work we do at MacStories. Yeah.
So the way that I've been thinking of Dialogue and describing it to friends and other people is, if you love the interviews that we've been doing on App Stories, imagine those, but taken to the next level, so that they are deeper, they're longer, and John and I can participate more. And they are much more focused around the idea of, we don't just talk about the apps and the tools and the computers that we use. We're going to talk about those, but not only that. That's not the entire focus. The main idea is, let's take a look at creativity and different creative efforts and different creative endeavors and different creative people through the lens of technology. So what kind of role did technology play into the careers of these people, and all of these different stories? And we have quite a collection of guests already. We're going to talk about that in a minute, but sort of to give you an idea, I see Dialogue as part of the MacStories cinematic universe, if you will.
Right.
The idea of, on MacStories, we publish all the articles and the in-depth reviews and all of that. On App Stories, we expand on that. We talk about apps, we talk about software, we talk about Apple News and upcoming stuff and all of that. On Dialogue, it's much more about the human aspect of, what does it mean to be creative in the age of technology that's ever present, whether it's mobile devices or desktop computers. What does it mean for publishing? What does it mean for music production? What does it mean for writing books or writing, for screenwriting, for example? So that idea of trying to broaden the scope a little bit more, and try to consider what is the effect of technology, not just what is technology, what is an app, but what has an app or an iPhone or a mobile OS enabled you to do. And so, as John mentioned, it's going to be a seasonal podcast in the sense that there will be a break between seasons because we need to plan the seasons. There's a lot of research involved. We need to also take a break because we're busy people, and it takes time to produce this kind of show. But also, it's a seasonal podcast in the context that in Apple Podcasts, in the podcast app, you will actually see the seasons. This is part of a new support in Apple Podcasts for these types of shows. So you will see season 1 and later season 2. And you will be able, John can talk about the details in a minute, but you will see this seasonal breakdown, visually speaking. That doesn't mean that this show is only available in Apple Podcasts. You can subscribe in Overcast, you can subscribe in Castro or in Pocket Cast, and it'll just be a regular show with reverse chronological order from latest episodes to the oldest episode. So it's just a regular show. It just shows you the seasonal breakdown in Apple Podcasts because so far that's the only app that supports seasons, visually speaking. Also in Apple Podcasts, starting today, you will be able to hear the trailer. It'll say season 1 trailer. That said, if you subscribe in Overcast or Castro or any other podcast client, it'll just show up the trailer as a regular episode. So it's just prettier and nicer, I guess, in Apple Podcasts, but it's available everywhere else. I'm super excited, John. John had the original idea. He pitched the idea to me sometime in December or January, maybe. And I said yes immediately, even though we were already busy with a bunch of new projects, because it's such a perfect idea to take what worked on App Stories and make it its own thing with more focus, with more of a sort of a structure around a single theme per season. It's something I've never done before. It's been a long road to get to this point, but I'm super excited to finally roll it out and to start planning season 2.
Yeah, I'm super excited too. It's what we're going to be doing too with these interviews is we're going to be doing long form interviews. A lot of these interviews are going to be like an hour and a half to 2 hours, but
Yep.
we're not going to be hitting you with 2-hour episodes. What we're doing is we're going to split them up into separate episodes. So you'll get a part 1 and a part 2 for a lot of these interviews. We wanted to keep it so that it was still a show that's roughly 45 minutes to an hour in length, but to give us the opportunity to really go into depth with a lot of really very interesting people. And as Federico said, it is seasonal, and in Apple Podcasts, that will give you a few advantages, I guess, if you come to the show, mid-season, for instance. Apple Podcasts would first download episode 1 for you, but for the most part, you can enjoy it wherever you are. So that won't be an issue.
Yeah, we do not believe in platform lockdown for any of our shows. So
Right.
It's got an open RSS feed. You can use it anywhere. You can listen on the website, which is dialogpodcast.net. It's got basically the same structure of App Stories with a few differences, as you will see also with time, with the way that we present guests and all of that. You will also find, of course, the podcasts, the episodes available on MacStories when we write about them. And I want you to explain sort of what we're going to do there. But you will also find all of this info for subscribing at dialogpodcast.net/subscribe. So go there right now. There's going to be links in the show notes, links in the chapters, links everywhere. And listen to the trailer and subscribe. You will also find them on MacStories, and we're going to do something a little different this time.
We're going to experiment with something a little new, which is we're going to do some articles around these interviews because Federico and I have done some of them already, as I mentioned. And I think that there's a lot of value in not just having the audio podcast, but also bringing the conversation and explaining some of the issues and thoughts that we are exploring in writing. So Federico and I will take turns and do some posts on MacStories that go into a little bit more depth about each of the topics and guests that we talk to. You'll see those published alongside the podcast episode. We've linked App Stories ever since it was first launched on MacStories, but that really didn't go beyond the summary of what that particular episode is. These will be a little bit more involved and have a little bit more there for you and to put it in context and to also find links about the people we're talking to and that sort of thing, which I'm really looking forward to. And you can follow the show on Twitter, of course, as well. It's at Dialog Podcast.
Yeah. So once again, we have a new show. It's called Dialog, and it's an evolution of the interviews that we used to do on App Stories, and it's a seasonal show. You can go to dialogpodcast.net, and today you will find the first trailer for season 1. It's a 4-minute trailer where we introduce listeners to the show and we explain what it's going to be. The first real episode, so season 1, episode 1, will be up tomorrow, Tuesday, May 28th, and it'll be on the website. It'll be on the podcast feed. You can find all of the details at dialogpodcast.net/subscribe. You can add it to Overcast, Apple Podcast, whatever you want to use. It's fine. In the first episode, it's gonna, as John mentioned, it'll be just John and we're going to talk about, sort of introduce the theme of the season. We're going to talk about writing. We're going to talk about how we got started for MacStories. We're going to talk about writing online and sort of our approach to communicating ideas with an audience. And we're going to sort of set the stage for the first guest of season 1 that I'm incredibly excited about. We're going to do a 2-part interview with one of, honestly, I can say one of my role models for starting MacStories. Episode 2 and episode 3 of season 1 of Dialog, we're going to interview Mr. John Gruber of Daring Fireball. And I'm super excited to release those episodes.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to sharing that with everybody. It's going to be those are really great episodes. I've already listened to them, and they turned out as well as I thought they did when we actually recorded them.
But I also want to say, do not expect Dialog to be about interviews with other Apple bloggers or, folks who have our jobs. We wanted to have John to set the stage for the entire season. And because, again, he was, with Daring Fireball is one of the reasons why I started MacStories 10 years ago. And so it felt right to launch a new project and talk about the history of Daring Fireball and sort of the evolution of online writing. But we're gonna interview songwriters. We're gonna interview screenwriting people. We're gonna, we have a diverse roster of guests. And planning this season 1 has been a learning experience in terms of how we can find guests, how we can, sort of guide the conversation around certain topics. And all of the lessons that we've learned in terms of structuring the interviews and finding guests and booking, these interviews, which can be time consuming because I'm in Italy, John is in America, and we have guests from all over the place. All of those lessons, we're going to apply them. And, once we start planning season 2. So it's the kind of show that on each season, like a good TV show, I suppose, gets better with time, hopefully.
Yeah, and I think, Federico, this is the kind of show that people who listen to App Stories already are going to enjoy because it is a spin-off of some of the interview episodes that we've done. And we, if you listen and you'll enjoy it, we'd ask that you maybe tell a friend about it too, because we're going with something here that's broader than what you would consider the traditional MacStories type of topic. And so we want to try to reach as many people who maybe wouldn't go to MacStories to read about the latest, task manager, but would still find the interviews with the writers we're going to talk to interesting. So please help us spread the word. All right, Federico, tomorrow's going to be an awfully big day. I'm really looking forward to it. We're all set to go. Everybody should look for Dialog to drop tomorrow morning. And for this episode of App Stories, I want to thank our 2 sponsors again. That's Lunar Display and Direct Mail. You can find me and Federico over at MacStories.net, where Federico is our editor-in-chief. And you can find both of us on Twitter and Instagram, where Federico is at Viticci, that's VITICCI, and I'm at John Voorhees, JOHNVOORHWES. Talk to you next week, Federico.
Ciao, John.